Take a slow breath in and let it go. There is nothing you need to do right now. Nothing to fix. Nothing to become. The day is finished with you. Let the noise soften. Let the body sink. Let the mind slow its steps. This is a story about patience, about repetition, about a boy who learned to practice when no one was watching. You do not need to remember it. You do not need to finish it. Just listen and rest. Michael Jeffrey Jordan was born on a winter morning, February 17, 1963, in Brooklyn, New York. But his story truly began in North Carolina, where his family settled when he was still young, in a quiet place where days moved slowly and nights were wide and still. The house was simple. The streets were calm. The backyard was everything. It was there that Michael first learned how to compete, not with the world, but with his older brother. Games lasted until the light disappeared. Wins were rare. Losses were constant. And each loss stayed with him, burning quietly, asking to be answered the next day. He was smaller then, quieter, easy to overlook, but something inside him did not forget. When the others went inside, Michael stayed out. He shot alone. He dribbled until his hands were tired. He practiced the same moves again and again, not because he was told to, but because repetition felt like control. In a world where nothing listened, practice always did. At night, he lay awake replaying moments in his head. Missed shots, missed chances, small failures that felt larger than they should have. But instead of pushing them away, he held them. Let them shape him. Let them teach him where to return in the morning. School came and went. Days passed. The body grew slowly. The hunger stayed the same. And when the time came to step onto the high school court, Michael believed, quietly, that he was ready. He wasn't. He was cut from the varsity team. The words were simple. The moment was not. He walked home slowly that day, the air heavy, the sky wide and empty. He did not cry. He did not shout. He went to the backyard and began to shoot. Again, and again, and again. That night, while the house slept, Michael Jordan stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something settle inside him. Not anger, not sadness, a promise. And from that night on, the work became silent. The backyard became a place of return. Every afternoon after school, Michael went there first. Before homework, before dinner, before anything else. The ball found his hands the way breath finds the chest, automatically, without thought. His brother was already there most days. Older, stronger, better. Games were short, intense, and unforgiving. There were no crowds, no referees, no mercy. Only the sound of the ball, the scrape of shoes, and the quiet rules that existed only between them. Michael lost often, and every loss carved something deeper inside him. He hated losing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. When the games ended, his brother went inside. Michael stayed. He shot until the light thinned and the air cooled. The same shot, the same spot, the same movement. Over and over, until the body learned what the mind could not yet explain. Some nights, his father came out to watch. He didn't say much. He didn't correct much. He just stood there, arms crossed, letting the rhythm speak for itself. Practice makes you ready, his father said once, quietly. Michael remembered that. In the house, life was simple. Dinner, chores, sleep. The days moved gently, but inside Michael, something was building. Not urgency, but resolve. A quiet certainty that the work he was doing alone would matter later, even if no one could see it yet. At school, he was still small, still easy to miss. Teachers did not know his name. Coaches did not call him special. And that was fine. The backyard knew him. The ball knew him. The repetition knew him. At night, he dreamed of courts filled with light. But when he woke, He returned to the same cracked concrete and bent rim. There was no disappointment in that, only understanding. Big things were built in small places. And Michael Jordan kept practicing where no one was watching. The day Michael was cut from the varsity team never really left him. It followed him quietly, like a shadow that only appeared when the light was just right. The words were simple, "You're not ready," but they settled deep, far below where anger lives, far below where excuses can reach. Michael went home that afternoon and did what he always did. He went to the backyard. The ball hit the ground again and again, steady and patient. Each bounce sounded like a question. Each shot sounded like an answer. He did not rush. He did not change the routine. He simply added time. More shots, more steps, more nights. The next morning, he woke early and ran. Not fast, not far. Just enough to feel his breath and remind himself that effort was something he could always control. At school, he was quiet. He listened more. He watched the older players move, learning their habits without being noticed. He joined the junior varsity team and dominated it, but he did not celebrate. After games, while others laughed, Michael went home and practiced. The cut had taught him something important. Talent could be ignored, but preparation could not. His mother noticed the change first. He was calmer, more focused, less distracted. He no longer asked if he was good enough. He simply worked as if the answer would reveal itself in time. When varsity tryouts came again, the gym felt different. The air was thicker, the lights brighter. Michael's heart was steady. His body moved without hesitation. The ball went where it was supposed to go. This time, they could not ignore him. When his name was called, he nodded once and went back to the line. There was no smile, no relief, only a quiet understanding that the work had already done its job. That night, he returned to the backyard and practiced, because the cut had stayed with him, not as pain, but as direction. Making the team did not change everything. Michael expected it might, that the world would feel different, lighter, easier, but it did not. The practices were harder, the drills longer, the expectations heavier. He was no longer proving he belonged. Now he had to stay, so he waited. He waited for minutes on the bench. He waited for plays to come his way. He waited for his body to catch up to his ambition. Waiting was uncomfortable, but it taught him patience, the kind that doesn't complain, the kind that watches and learns. He studied older players, how they moved when tired, how they breathed between plays, how they stayed calm when the game turned loud. At night, he practiced alone, repeating the moves he saw until they became his own. The backyard heard everything, the missed shots, the whispered frustration, the long silence between attempts. His father watched sometimes, saying nothing. His mother reminded him to sleep. Michael did both. Slowly the minutes came. Slowly the shots fell. Slowly the waiting ended. When the ball finally stayed in his hands, it felt familiar, like something he had already held 1,000 times. The game slowed for him. The noise softened. The court became a place he could breathe. He was still young, still learning, still waiting for what came next. But waiting no longer scared him. It had become part of the work. When Michael arrived at the University of North Carolina, everything felt bigger. The gym, the campus, the expectations. He was no longer the boy from the backyard or the quiet kid waiting for his turn. He was surrounded by players who had been the best everywhere they had gone. The air was thick with talent, and the work began again from the beginning. So Michael returned to what he knew. He practiced early. He stayed late. He listened. Coach Dean Smith spoke often about patience, about trusting the system, about letting the game come to you. It was not the style Michael wanted at first. He wanted the ball. He wanted control. He wanted to move faster than everyone else. But college taught him restraint. It taught him that greatness was not always loud, that the right play mattered more than the big one, that waiting could be a form of strength. In the gym, he repeated the same movements, the same shots, the same cuts, until they became invisible. The body learned the rhythm. The mind followed. And then, one night, the moment came. The championship game was close. The clock was quiet. The ball found Michael in the corner, just like it had in the backyard. There was no crowd in his mind, no noise, only the shot. He released the ball. It went in. The world erupted, but Michael felt calm. He had already taken that shot 1,000 times. This one just happened to matter more to everyone else. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the same stillness he had felt as a child after long practice. The lesson was clear. When the work is done in silence, the moment is easy. And Michael Jordan kept working. The NBA did not feel like a dream. It felt like work. When Michael Jordan arrived in Chicago, the city was loud, restless, unfinished. The team had struggled for years, and no one expected calm to arrive with a young rookie. The arenas were bigger, the players stronger, the nights longer. Everything moved faster than college ever had. But Michael moved the same. He practiced early. He stayed late. He repeated the basics. The first games were a blur of travel and lights, of hotel rooms that all felt the same, of courts that echoed differently in every city. Defenders were older, smarter, heavier. They pushed. They grabbed. They tested him, trying to see how much space he really needed to breathe. He needed very little. Michael scored because he worked. He ran because he had always run. He rose because he had practiced rising. The body did not panic when pressure came. It recognized it. Night after night, he played until the noise faded and only rhythm remained. The ball came back to his hands. The floor opened. The game slowed. People began to notice. They said he was special. They said he was different. They said he was something new. Michael did not listen. After games, he returned to empty gyms. After wins, he practiced. After losses, he practiced more. The league learned his name, but he was still learning himself. The first NBA nights were not about fame or dominance. They were about survival, about building something steady enough to last, about proving quietly that the work done alone could hold up under bright lights. And every night, when the arena emptied and the city went to sleep, Michael Jordan stayed awake just long enough to practice one more time, because the work was never finished. Empty gyms became Michael's favorite place, not because they were peaceful, but because they told the truth. When the crowd was gone, when the lights were dim, when the echoes of the game had faded, there was nothing left to hide behind. Only the floor, the ball, and the sound of breath moving in and out. This was where Michael felt most alive. He came early, before anyone asked him to, before anyone watched, before the city woke. He shot until the ball returned to his hands without thought. He moved through drills slowly, carefully, feeling each step settle into muscle memory. There was no rush here, no clock, no scoreboard, only repetition. Some nights, the trainers found him still there after everyone else had left. The ball bouncing, the shoes squeaking, the same shot again and again. They asked why he stayed so long. Michael shrugged. This is the work. In games, the results showed. His body moved as if it already knew the future. The floor opened. Defenders arrived late. He scored without forcing, jumped without effort, landed softly, balanced. The league grew louder. Michael grew quieter. He understood something now that others had not yet learned, that greatness was built when no one was looking and revealed when everyone was. When playoff time came, the noise doubled, the pressure sharpened. And still, he returned to the empty gym, the place that never lied. There, he practiced patience. There, he practiced calm. There, he practiced being ready. And when the lights came back on, he was already waiting. There was a wall waiting for him. Not a wall made of bricks, but of bodies, arms, and patience. The Detroit Pistons did not fear Michael Jordan. They did not rush him. They did not chase him. They simply stood in his way and waited. Each drive ended the same. A hit, a fall, a slow rise. The first time, Michael thought it was a test. The second time, he knew it was a message. The Pistons were not trying to stop him for one night. They were trying to stop him forever. The noise of the crowd disappeared under the sound of contact. But he did not complain. He went to the gym. He lifted weights for the first time in his life, slowly, carefully, learning to become heavier without becoming slower. He ate more, slept more, rested more. The work changed shape, but it did not stop. The wall returned the next year, and the next. Each time, Michael was stronger. Each time, he lasted longer. Each time, the wall cracked a little. He learned that talent was not enough, that speed was not enough, that even obsession had to be paired with patience. When the wall finally fell, it was not dramatic. It was quiet. A series of plays, a series of breaths, a series of moments where the Pistons reached, and Michael was already gone. He did not celebrate. He simply kept walking, because the wall had taught him something important, that nothing worth reaching comes without resistance. And resistance, if met with calm, always moves eventually. The work changed again. After the Pistons, Michael no longer trained only for skill. He trained for endurance, for stability. Court work in the afternoon, film at night. The routine never shifted. Only the weight did. Only the difficulty did. Michael did not chase novelty. He chased mastery, and mastery lived in repetition. The body responded. He became stronger without losing speed, calmer without losing edge. When the season began again, he carried himself differently. The moments shorter, the pressure lighter. Opponents felt it. Michael did not rush shots. He chose them. He did not fight contact. The game became less about motion and more about timing. And timing, he knew, was something you earned by staying. When the final buzzer sounded, Michael sat down and closed his eyes. He had been here before, 1,000 times in practice. And he knew he would return. The night of the first championship did not feel loud to Michael. It felt still. The confetti fell slowly, like snow that had nowhere to land. The crowd roared, but the sound reached him as if from far away, softened by the calm that had settled inside his chest. He held the trophy briefly, feeling its weight, then set it down like something that had always been there. What stayed with him was not the noise. It was the quiet moment afterward, alone in the locker room, when he unlaced his shoes and felt the floor beneath his feet. The same floor he had walked on since childhood, the same work that had carried him here. The sun was low. There was no parade yet, no interviews, no celebration waiting. He went to the gym and shot. The same shots, the same spots, the same rhythm, because winning had not changed the work. In the months that followed, people began to treat him differently. They spoke with reverence now. They waited for magic. Another championship followed, and then another. Each one felt lighter in his hands, not because it mattered less, but because he understood it more. Winning was not an ending. It was a byproduct. The real work had already been done, long before anyone watched. At night, when the arenas emptied, Michael still found his way to empty gyms. He still practiced the shots no one asked him to take anymore. He still ran the drills no one thought he needed, because he knew something the world did not. The moment you stop practicing the basics is the moment the game leaves you behind. So he stayed with the work, and the work stayed with him. 3. Winning once teaches you what is possible. Winning again teaches you what it costs. After the first championships, Michael felt the weight shift. The pressure was no longer about proving anything. It was about protecting what had already been built. Every night, every game, every possession carried expectation. The world no longer hoped. It demanded. Michael answered the same way he always had. He practiced. He simplified everything. Fewer moves. Fewer thoughts. He trusted the repetition that had shaped him, letting the game flow instead of forcing it. The more the world tried to speed him up, the slower he moved inside. The team learned this rhythm too. They learned to wait, to breathe, to trust. When gains tightened, Michael's pulse stayed steady. The moment did not feel bigger than him. It felt familiar, like the backyard, like the empty gym, like the late nights when nothing else existed but effort. Championships came again and again. But something changed in Michael during those years. He began to understand that winning was not a peak you reached. It was a state you maintained. He watched film alone. He lifted when others rested. Not because he was afraid to lose. There was a season when everything felt quiet. The court felt like home. The work felt complete before the night even began. He moved with ease now, not rushed, not forced, not loud. Each possession unfolded naturally, like a breath that knew where it was going. Defenders arrived late. Doubles came too slow. The ball left his hands calmly and found its place without effort. People called it dominance. Michael called it clarity. He knew when to score and when to wait, when to lead and when to disappear. The game had taught him patience, and patience had taught him control. There was nothing left to chase, only something to maintain. In practice, he still repeated the basics. In games, he trusted them. When the championships came, they came quietly, without surprise. The work had already finished the conversation. The results were just echoes. At night, after wins, Michael sat alone and breathed slowly, feeling the same calm that had followed him since the backyard days. The noise no longer reached him. The expectations no longer pressed. The game and the work were the same thing now. And in that space, he understood something few ever do, that mastery is silent, and silence is powerful. By the time Michael reached the top, the air around him had changed. Every arena was full before the doors opened. Every night carried the same demand. Every game was supposed to be perfect. The world no longer watched him play. It waited to be amazed. Michael felt it in the warm-ups, when the noise never softened. He felt it in the locker room, when silence was replaced by anticipation. He felt it in the quiet moments before sleep, when the mind replayed not mistakes, but expectations. So he returned to routine. Routine was safe. Routine did not ask questions. Routine did not care who was watching. He woke early before the city. He shot alone before the cameras. He repeated the same movements he had practiced since the backyard, the same rhythm, the same breath. The pressure stayed outside. Inside, everything was calm. In games, he moved slowly, deliberately, as if time belonged to him. He did not chase moments. He waited for them. He did not force shots. He let them arrive. The more the world pushed, the more he softened his grip, and the game listened. Championships came again, but they no longer felt like peaks. They felt like seasons, passing, returning, repeating. Michael understood now that dominance was not about rising higher. It was about staying steady while everything else shook. But even steadiness has weight. Late at night, alone in hotel rooms, he sometimes sat on the edge of the bed and listened to his breath, letting the noise fade. The work still mattered. The love was still there. But something quieter had begun to call him. Not away from the game, toward stillness, and he did not ignore it. The phone rang when the night was still. Michael answered it half awake, expecting nothing, prepared for nothing. And in that moment, Everything he had built, every routine, every repetition, every plan, fell silent. His father was gone. The man who had watched from the backyard without speaking. The man who believed in work more than words. A man who taught him that effort was a form of respect. Grief did not come like pain. It came like emptiness. The court felt different after that. The ball sounded hollow. The noise of the crowd passed through him instead of around him. He played, he practiced, he did the work, but the work no longer filled him the way it once had. At night, he sat alone, lights low, listening to the room breathe. The silence was heavier than any opponent he had faced. So he stepped away, not from basketball, from the noise. When he told the world he was leaving, people searched for explanations. Michael did not give them any. He only followed the pull he felt in the quiet moments when sleep would not come. He went to a baseball field, not to escape, but to rest. The baseball field was empty when Michael first stepped onto it. No lights, no crowd, no expectation. Just grass, dirt, and a long quiet that felt unfamiliar and strangely comforting. The game moved slowly here. The pauses were longer, the rhythm gentler. There was time to think, time to breathe, time to feel the day pass. Michael needed that. He practiced the same way he always had, early, alone, repeating simple movements until they felt natural. The swing was awkward at first. The misses were frequent, the progress slow. But he did not rush it. He was no longer chasing excellence. He was learning how to be still. The world watched and waited for failure. Michael ignored it. At night, he slept more deeply than he had in years. The body softened. The mind loosened. There was no pressure to be perfect. Only the quiet work of showing up and trying again. The silence began to heal him. Each day on the field became a meditation. Step, breathe, swing, wait. The simplicity of it stripped everything else away. There were no expectations to carry here, no legends to protect, no moments to create, just the day. And slowly, as the days passed, Michael felt something return, not hunger, not obsession, balance. The game he had left behind waited patiently. And one day, in the stillness of the baseball field, Michael knew it was time to go home. 4. The decision came quietly. There was no announcement in Michael's mind, no dramatic moment, no sudden pull. Just a calm knowing, the kind that arrives when the noise has finally settled enough to hear yourself think. Basketball was calling him back, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily, like a familiar rhythm returning to the body. When he stepped back onto the court, it felt smaller than he remembered. The floor was the same. The lines were the same. The ball still fit his hands perfectly, but he was different now. Lighter, slower in the best way, calmer. The first practices were simple. He ran, he shot, he breathed. The body remembered everything. The years of repetition rose quietly from muscle and bone, as if they had never left. There was no fear of rust, no panic about time. The work was still there, waiting patiently for him. When he played again, the world exploded. Michael did not. He moved with patience, choosing moments instead of forcing them. The hunger that once burned now glowed, steady and controlled. Each game felt like a conversation rather than a battle. The noise passed over him like wind. At night, after games, he sat alone and smiled. He had left to find silence, and silence had brought him back ready. The work became quiet again, not because it was easy, but because Michael no longer needed to prove anything to himself. The return had been enough. The body felt whole. The mind was clear. The rhythm was back. Practice looked the same as it always had. Early mornings. Empty gyms. Slow repetition. But something was different now. He moved with patience instead of urgency. He let plays unfold instead of forcing them open. The game felt wider, calmer, as if time itself had slowed to match his breath. The championships came again. One, then another, then another. The world called it dominance, but Michael felt something else: completion. Each title was not a climb, but a circle closing gently. The work he had begun as a boy in the backyard was finishing its long conversation with him. Between games, he rested more. He spoke less. He watched his teammates grow, trusting them to carry moments he once carried alone. Leadership became quieter, more subtle, like guiding a current rather than fighting it. At night, in hotel rooms lit by soft lamps, he sat still and listened to his breath. The noise no longer followed him there. The pressure no longer pressed. Everything that had once felt heavy now felt understood. The second three-peat was not about winning. It was about staying long enough to finish well. And Michael Jordan stayed. The final years did not arrive suddenly. They arrived quietly, in small moments that only Michael noticed. A longer pause before tying his shoes. A deeper breath before the first sprint. A stretch held just a little longer than before. The body was still strong, but it spoke more now, and Michael had learned how to listen. The team around him was changing. Some faces were familiar, shaped by years of shared work. Others were new, younger, faster, restless in the way only youth can be. Michael watched them carefully, the same way he once watched older players from the bench. He saw the hunger in their eyes, the impatience in their movement, the need to prove something quickly. He did not correct them loudly. He showed them instead. He arrived before everyone. He left after everyone. He practiced the basics with the same seriousness he had when he was cut from varsity. And slowly, the team learned. They learned that showing up early mattered. That preparation was invisible but powerful. That calm traveled faster than noise. Games became heavier now, not because they were harder, but because each one carried the weight of time. Michael felt the end approaching, not with fear, but with awareness. Every possession felt like something to be placed carefully, not thrown away. Every moment mattered because it would not return. When the ball found him in late-game moments, he did not rush. He breathed. He felt the floor. He waited for the game to open itself, the way it always did when he stayed patient. And it did. The shots came slower now, but they came with certainty. The jumps were lower, but the landings were calmer. The celebrations were quieter, but the meaning was deeper. Travel was harder. Recovery took longer. Sleep mattered more. But Michael stayed. He stayed because the team needed him. He stayed because the work was not finished. He stayed because leaving before the work was done would have broken the rhythm he had followed his whole life. In locker rooms after games, he sat alone longer, listening to the sounds of tape being torn, of lockers closing, of footsteps fading. He let those sounds settle into memory, knowing they would soon be gone. The final games arrived one by one, each carrying the feeling of goodbye that no one spoke out loud. And when the last shot finally left his hands, when the clock emptied itself completely, Michael stood still. He did not raise his arms. He did not search the crowd. He simply breathed. The work had been carried to the end, and that was enough. The last season felt different from the beginning, not because the work had changed, but because the meaning had. Every practice, every flight, every quiet moment in the locker room carried a softness that had not been there before. Michael noticed it in the way he laced his shoes more slowly, the way he stretched longer, the way he sat in silence after drills instead of rising immediately. He knew this was the end, and he did not fight it. The body still responded when called upon. The mind was still sharp. The rhythm was still there. But the urgency that had driven him for decades had softened into something gentler, something closer to gratitude. The team leaned on him heavily now, not just for points, but for calm. When games tightened, Eyes turned toward him without anyone asking. When pressure built, he slowed the moment with his breath, with his posture, with the way he held the ball. The younger players followed his rhythm, even when they did not realize it. The road trips were longer now. Hotel rooms felt quieter. Flights felt heavier. Mornings came faster than expected. Michael used the time differently. He slept more. He spoke less. He watched more. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he lay awake listening to the building settle, thinking about the first nights in empty gyms, the backyard, the cut that had shaped him. The memories did not pull him backward. They anchored him where he was. Games came and went. Some were brilliant. Some were ordinary. All of them mattered. Not because of the record, but because each one was a final time, a final warm-up, a final walk down a familiar hallway, a final look at a crowd that had once felt endless. When the season ended, there was no explosion inside him, only calm. He stood alone on the court one last time, listening to the sound of shoes, of voices, of breath. The arena was full, but he felt only quiet. The game had given him everything it could, and he had given everything back. As he walked away, slowly, without turning around, Michael Jordan knew the truth. The work was finished, and it was time to rest. Walking away did not happen in one moment. It happened in 1,000 small ones. It happened the first morning. Michael woke up and did not reach for his shoes. It happened the first night he slept without replaying a game in his mind. It happened the first day the gym stayed quiet and he did not feel pulled toward it. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. For most of his life, noise had shaped his days. The sound of the ball, the echo of arenas, the rhythm of practice, the constant movement toward something. Now the movement was gone, and what remained was space. Wide open, patient space. Michael moved through his days slowly. He woke early out of habit, not need. He made coffee and sat by the window, watching light stretch across the floor. He noticed how long mornings could be when there was nothing to chase. He noticed how calm could arrive without effort when it was allowed to. The body adjusted. The aches softened. The breath deepened. The nights grew longer and heavier with rest. He walked more now, through quiet streets, through open spaces, through places that had never mattered before. He listened to the sound of his footsteps, steady and unhurried, and realized that this rhythm had always been there, waiting for him to notice it. People still spoke his name. They always would. But the sound of it no longer pulled him back. It passed over him like wind over water, leaving the surface smooth again. He answered questions kindly, briefly, then returned to his quiet life. Sometimes he entered a gym, not to train, not to prove, just to feel the floor beneath his feet. He took a few shots, slow and gentle, letting the ball roll back to him without effort. Then he left, before the rhythm could turn into obligation. In the evenings, he sat outside as the day faded. The sun lowered slowly, as if it too was learning to rest. The sky changed colors without asking permission. Michael breathed deeply and let the day finish itself. This was the lesson he had spent his life learning, that effort is powerful, but rest is sacred. Walking away was not loss. It was completion. And in that completion, Michael Jordan finally allowed himself to be still. 6. Life without the noise arrived slowly. The way evening arrives when you are no longer watching the clock. Michael noticed it first in the mornings. There was no alarm, yet he still woke early. The body remembered decades of discipline, but the day no longer demanded anything in return. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet, feeling how different it was when silence was not something to earn. He moved through the house gently. Coffee brewed. Light entered the room. The world unfolded without urgency. For the first time in his life, Michael did not need to prepare for anything. There was no practice to sharpen him, no opponent to study, No game waiting to test him. The quiet was complete. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt like relief. He walked often now, slow walks with no destination. He noticed small things, leaves shifting in the wind, the way shadows moved across walls, the sound of birds calling to each other. These were details he had once passed without seeing, rushing toward the next drill, the next flight, the next moment. A gym still existed, but it was no longer a place of obligation. When he entered, it was with curiosity, not hunger. He touched the ball, took a few shots, felt the familiar rhythm return briefly, like an old song. Then he left, before the body asked for more. Evenings were his favorite. The sun lowered quietly, the sky softened. The world grew smaller and kinder. Michael sat outside and breathed, letting the day end without shaping it. He no longer needed to be great. He no longer needed to be ready. He no longer needed to be anything at all. Sometimes memories came. The backyard, the cut, the empty gyms, the championships. They came without weight now, like photographs laid gently on a table. He did not reach for them. He let them be. People still spoke his name. He heard it in passing, on television, in conversations, in places he did not expect. But it no longer pulled him backward. The game lived where it belonged, behind him, complete, finished, whole. At night, he slept deeply. No dreams of clocks, no dreams of arenas, no dreams of pressure. Only wide, open rest. Michael Jordan had spent his life mastering motion. Now, he was learning the quiet art of stillness. And stillness, he realized, might be the hardest skill of all. There is a moment when legacy stops being something the world talks about and becomes something you feel in your own body. For Michael, that moment came quietly, not at an arena, not during a ceremony, not when someone said his name. It came one afternoon when he was sitting alone, light moving across the floor, and he realized he was not thinking about basketball at all. The game had finally let him go. Legacy, he learned, is not noise. It is not numbers. It is not memory repeated by others. It is the calm that remains when the work is finished. He felt it in the way his body moved now, slower, softer, without tension. He felt it in the way his mind no longer replayed moments, no longer searched for correction. The need to adjust, to improve, to prepare had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance of what had already been done. Sometimes young players came to visit. They arrived nervous, respectful, unsure of what to say. They expected wisdom. They expected secrets. Michael gave them none of that. He showed them the gym. He told them to show up early. He told them to practice the same thing until it felt boring, then practice it again. Consistency is louder than talent, he said once softly. They nodded, not fully understanding yet. He smiled, because understanding always came later. When they left, the house returned to silence, and Michael welcomed it. Silence had become a friend. It had followed him through endings, through losses, through returns, and now it stayed with him without asking anything in return. In the evenings, he walked slowly as the sun lowered, watching the world rest. The sky changed colors the same way seasons had changed during his career. Gradually, without announcement, he noticed how nothing rushed, how everything arrived when it was ready. This was the final lesson. That legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what you no longer need to carry. Michael breathed deeply and felt the day settle around him. The work had been done long ago. The story had been told. The noise had faded on its own. And in the stillness that remained, he finally understood. Nothing was missing. The days became simple. Not empty, not small, just simple. Michael woke when the light entered the room, not when a clock told him to. He lay still for a moment, feeling the quiet of the house, listening to the soft sounds of morning. Air moving, wood settling, the distant world waking on its own schedule. There was no reason to rush, no reason to prepare. The day would arrive whether he met it or not. He made his coffee slowly. He drank it slowly. He watched the light move across the floor, the same way it had moved across quartz his entire life, steady and patient. The same rhythm was still there, just without noise. Some mornings he walked, no destination, no distance to measure, just movement for the sake of feeling the body move. His steps were even, unhurried. The breath stayed calm. The world felt wide again, the way it had when he was a child in the backyard, before wins and losses had names. The gym still existed, but it no longer called to him. When he entered, it was with curiosity, not obligation. He took a few shots, feeling the ball leave his hands gently, without force, without expectation. He smiled sometimes, not because of the shot, but because of how little it mattered now. He left before sweat came, before the rhythm pulled him back, before the past asked him to stay. Afternoons were quiet. He read. He sat. He watched the sky change. Time moved differently now. It no longer pressed forward. It simply passed, like water moving around stone. Sometimes people visited. They asked questions. They wanted stories. They wanted answers. Michael listened kindly and returned to silence. The silence always waited. It always welcomed him back without judgment. Evenings were his favorite. The sun lowered slowly, the world softening with it. He sat outside, hands resting on his knees, breath moving gently in and out. There was no need to think, no need to remember. The work of his life had already been completed. These ordinary days were the reward no one talked about, not the championships, not the numbers, not the fame. This, a day that asked nothing, a breath that came easily, a life that no longer needed to prove itself. And as night came, Michael Jordan rested in the simplicity of it all, knowing that ordinary days were never ordinary at all. They were everything he had been working toward. The quiet does not leave all at once. It stays. It lingers in the corners of rooms, in the spaces between breaths, in the moments when nothing needs to happen. Michael felt it most in the early evenings, when the day began to soften and the world slowed without asking permission. He sat still, not waiting for anything, not remembering anything, just letting time move around him the way water moves around stone. The same calm that once visited him only after long nights of work now stayed all day, steady and unbroken. This quiet was different from silence. Silence can feel empty. Quiet feels full. It was full of the work he had done, full of the repetitions no one had seen, full of the nights when the gym had been empty and the ball had been his only companion. The quiet carried those moments gently, without replaying them. Michael noticed how his body had changed, not weaker, not smaller, just softer. The tension that once lived in his shoulders had loosened. His hands rested more easily at his sides. Even his breath had slowed, settling into a rhythm that did not need to be guided. He walked through his days with awareness now, aware of the way light changed across walls, aware of how air cooled in the evenings, aware of how time no longer pressed forward, but flowed. Sometimes he sat outside and listened to the wind move through trees, the same sound he had heard as a boy in the backyard. It reminded him that life had always been simple. It was people who had made it loud. In the gym, the echoes were different now. When he entered, it was not to work, but to remember how stillness felt inside movement. He took a few shots, slow and deliberate, letting the ball return to him without hurry. Then he left, before effort turned into habit again. He did not miss the noise. He did not miss the crowds. He did not miss the pressure. What remained was enough. At night, he lay down without thought, without planning tomorrow, without replaying yesterday. Sleep came easily, like a familiar place he had finally learned to visit without effort. The quiet stayed with him as he drifted deeper, carrying him gently, the same way discipline once had. Michael Jordan had mastered motion. Now he had mastered rest. And rest, he realized, was the final victory. The night settles without asking. The world grows smaller, softer, quieter, as if it knows this is the place where stories are meant to end. Michael lies still, listening to the slow rhythm of breath, feeling the weight of the day release its hold one moment at a time. There is no need to think now. The work has been done. The road has been walked. The silence has arrived. Breath moves in and out. Each breath feels deeper than the last, as if it is carrying the body down into rest, away from memory, away from effort, away from the need to be anything at all. The mind loosens, letting go of edges, letting go of shape. The backyard is quiet. The gym is empty. The court is still. All the places that once demanded everything now ask for nothing. The story no longer moves forward. It drifts. The breath becomes slow and steady, the same rhythm that carried him through nights of practice, through seasons of effort, through years of becoming. The rhythm remains, even when everything else is softened into sleep. There is nothing left to hold, nothing left to chase. Only this moment, stretching gently, endlessly, like a calm horizon with no need for tomorrow. And as the night deepens, Michael Jordan rests. Not as a player, not as a champion, not as a legend, but as a man who has finally come home to stillness. If sleep has not come yet, let it come now. If the mind is still moving, let it slow. If the body is still awake, let it soften. The story will stay quiet. The breath will stay slow. The night will hold you gently. And when sleep arrives, it will arrive the same way this story ends, without effort, without sound, without needing to be finished.